Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Campus Safety Voices podcast. My name is Amy Rock, and I am the senior editor for Campus Safety Magazine. Since the COVID-19 vaccine rollout, there have been many discussions about the unique storage and transportation needs of each vaccine, including shelf life and the ultra-low temperatures at which they need to be stored. This is where temperature monitoring technology comes into play. I had the opportunity to speak about this technology with Lorn Clancey, CenTrak's Senior Director of Wireless Environment Monitoring Solutions. In our chat, we discussed the technology's role during the pandemic, challenges hospitals are facing in regard to vaccine storage, and how these types of technologies can be used beyond the pandemic and vaccine storage. We also had the chance to discuss other topics that would be useful for anyone who is playing a role in vaccine distribution. Take a listen. Before we jump into our conversation, for some context for our listeners, can we just start by talking about what Suntrack does and what the company's role has been in helping with the vaccine rollout?
Sure. Well, CenTrak is a leader in the RTLS space, and that's an acronym for Real-Time Location Service. So, as part of one of our use cases, temperature and environmental monitoring is actually a significant part of our business. Perhaps a little less known than the RTLS side. And what we've done relative to the vaccine rollout is really significant in that we provide acute care sites, really some of the larger hospital systems, the ability to store safely the COVID vaccines. So, and we all know that there are several different types of vaccines that are now coming to bear, all with different stability budgets and concerns. So we're in a place where we can really address all of what's coming down the pike.
Okay. And from your company's perspective or yours, what have been the biggest challenges in storing the vaccine, and how have those problems been addressed, or how have processes been changed to accommodate those challenges?
Yeah, so there's such a huge awareness around COVID vaccines, and rightfully so, that everybody is watching very carefully. And as far as we're concerned, we've been monitoring ultra low freezers, minus 80s, which is where the Pfizer vaccine is stored, for years. It just happens that in this case, that the contents are really visible and really important. But, we do clinical trial drugs, we do patient samples in these ultra low units. So it's not a stretch for us to do this in any way. It's really standard fare. It's just the notoriety of what's being monitored is what's a little different. So whether it be, the ultra cold temperatures that Pfizer requires, or the frozen temperatures that Moderna requires at about minus 25, and then of course we're going to get into the J&J, which is 2 to 8. Novavax, I think, is going to be about the same, and then who knows whether we're going to get AstraZeneca here, or maybe we'll even get some Sputnik. I don't know.
Yeah, so I mean, for you guys, you've had the technology in place, like you said, and the processes in place. So it's just, I guess you're having an advantage in that perspective. And from hospital people that I've spoken to, some do as well. Like a lot of them have said, we've stored vaccines for decades, whether it's been a flu, administering the flu vaccine to their staff and patients as well. It's just, I think for them, it's adjusting to the influx and also the unpredictability of when the vaccine is going to come to them. A lot of them have said, for their first shipment, we got a call that it was on its way and then it got delayed. So I think it's hospitals, for them, they have, for example, CenTrak technology in place to help them store it, but it's the unsureness of all the other aspects of transporting it that seem to be the most challenging.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. The whole cold chain integrity piece is it's really quite complicated in making sure that from manufacturing point all the way to being injected into the patient's arm, that integrity piece has to be maintained the entire way with traceability. And CenTrak fits a portion of that. I wouldn't say that we really are doing last mile, but we are doing, into the hospital, and then from the hospital, while we can do last mile, there are other options that people might want to consider. However, we do have, as long as that hospital is on the same network as to where that vaccine may be transported to, then that data from that thermal packaging box can be collected at that site, then pushed up into the network where all that data is then collected. So, we are well known in the cold storage unit within the hospital, but we can do other types of monitoring. And the other, I think, important piece is that the CDC is very, very specific on the care and handling of vaccines. They've bolted on the COVID vaccine care and handling to a standard document that stipulates how it's done, the design of the sensor, what's expected. So there's not a lot of room for modification. You do have to meet that CDC care and handling guide.
Okay. And I imagine CenTrak regularly speaks to hospitals who are storing vaccines using your technology. Can you talk about the challenges you've heard from hospital personnel and how your technology has been able to help them?
Well, of course, the biggest thing that everybody wants to be sure of is that the sensor is recording data at, in the case of, again, because of the notoriety associated with COVID, they may want to collect data every 5 minutes and make sure that it's within range. But why do people monitor? Because they want to know when there is a temperature excursion so that they can then do the appropriate corrective action to mitigate the problem. So that could be something as simple as turning the temperature down, or in some cases, maybe turning the temperature up on the cold storage unit. If that doesn't address the problem, then there has to be a process typically managed by the pharmacy to say, okay, we're getting everything out of that cold storage unit and we're moving it ASAP to one that we know is functioning. So CenTrak provides the ability to monitor and alert, to send out notifications to people that have to be in the know to be able to react to any kind of problem that might occur. So I wouldn't say it's a challenge. It's all there. The hospital does have policies around this already. Again, it's COVID vaccine, so everybody's watching very carefully.
We've definitely on Campus Safety covered a few instances where freezers have malfunctioned in one way or another, whether it's they've lost power and didn't have a backup generator or sensors were broken. Has CenTrak had to address any of these issues, or is once the technology is in place, is it kind of on the hospitals to handle any malfunctions that might come their way?
Well, I think in the case of failure on a cold storage unit to, if it loses power or something on that order, then that's really up to the hospital's facilities team to address. CenTrak's role is to provide alerts that the temperature has risen. We're on a network, and provided that network is functioning and the system is in use, then everything can be monitored and then reacted to in the event of an excursion.
Okay. And I imagine there are some similar technologies out there to CenTrak. Do you think there's anything that helps set it apart from other companies that are putting out similar technology?
Well, yeah, so I think one of the big attractions to CenTrak is that, as I mentioned very early on, that we are what's called an RTLS solutions provider. We offer multiple use cases, everything from asset tracking to hand hygiene compliance to infant security, a whole range, nurse call monitoring, a whole range of use cases. So it becomes really easy for a hospital to say, gosh, CenTrak's got a terrific temperature monitoring solution. Let's just use that, or we're going to add on to the system we already had, because now we just had to go purchase 10 ultra low freezers, and we'll just call CenTrak and get more sensors. And we've seen a real uptick in our ultra low sensor business.
Yeah, I'm sure people or hospitals who have used your technology, like you said, for something like infant security, were happy to see that it was able to be used in storing the vaccine as well, if they hadn't been storing the vaccine prior.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, as I think we said earlier on, that hospitals have been storing vaccines for the Vaccines for Children's program for many years. So it's the same. COVID's the same thing. It's just got maybe in some cases different temperature requirements, but it's still the same.
Right. Yeah, I think even myself expect there to be like this big different situation that needs to happen, and it's not necessarily the case.
No, but there is. But when the ultra low Pfizer vaccine is shipped, we do know that there's special temperature ranges that it has to be kept, even in the thermal box. There's I think you're familiar with the dry ice situation there. That has to be refilled. You can do it up to 5 times. So there's that piece is very, very specific. But once it gets into the ultra low freezer, it's pretty much standard fare.
Right. Okay. And right now we've all seen that community vaccination sites, are starting to pop up more and more now that it's becoming more available to the general public and not just hospital personnel. Has CenTrak played a role in vaccine storage at these community vaccination sites?
Well, it's hard to know down to what level we're participating at, because once the sensors go into the hospital, it's a little hard to know specifically what device it's on unless it's all captured in the user interface. But it's certainly something that, as long as there's a network available for that sensor to provide real-time data in a pop-up environment, then yes, we can. I wish there were more pop-up environments. There were certainly an awful lot when it came to the COVID testing piece, drive-in test sites, but we all know how slow and painfully slow the rollout has been. It's absolutely within our capabilities to support any kind of a pop-up situation.
Okay. And this might not apply, but do you have any predictions for the future of CenTrak's involvement in the vaccine rollout once it is more widely available to the general public?
Well, I'm not a terribly good procrastinator, ability to read the tea leaves, but I do think that we'll continue to participate in a very big way, because we do have a proven technology, well accepted and trusted to deliver the information that caregivers, pharmacy directors, and hospital operations folks expect. There really should be no room for error in this, and we're able to give them a solid solution. So wherever it goes, whether it be the new variants that we might be facing, I imagine that the care given to the existing vaccine versus these new ones will still be the same. There'll still be the same temperature requirements. So I anticipate that we'll be able to do all that.
Do you maybe have anything else you want to share that you've learned along the way, or CenTrak has learned throughout this whole process, that you think could be helpful to hospitals or anyone who's tasked with the vaccine rollout and distributing it?
Well, you know what? There's one thing that I think is important to know. Everybody's focused on, let's get the sensors in there. Let's get them in those cold storage unit, getting them to report data, and we have all that information. Well, what happens in a year, right? So there is something called NIST, which is a standard, an accuracy standard that all sensor and probe manufacturers have to comply to, which means that if we state the accuracy is, say, half a degree or one degree centigrade, that it has to be able to report that accuracy for a specific period of time. Now, we do it for 2 years, and then after 2 years, there is a need to recalibrate or validate the accuracy of that sensor, because if it drifts, which they can do, and you start to get an incorrect temperature, that could be a problem, because you're not really recording, you're not getting the right information. So to validate that, there has to be a process to exchange or somehow revalidate that probe. So what CenTrak does is we offer this NIST replacement program where the probe is just exchanged, and with that you get a new certificate that any inspector would want to see, to know that yes, the hospital is reporting accurate data from the CenTrak sensor. So that's good for a couple of years, and then there's this replacement process, which from CenTrak's perspective is very simple and low cost, that the hospital would need to participate in.
Okay. We've covered this on campus safety, but there are a lot of, whether it's a hospital, a K-12 school, or a college campus, so many of them have invested in technologies that I think they just panicked and implemented them, and they really won't be used beyond the pandemic. It's great that hospitals or anywhere else that has purchased a technology like CenTrak can use it far beyond just the pandemic once it's over, or whatever the next couple of years look like. It's a good technology, it sounds like, to invest in.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, the sensors can be redeployed into other environments, although I imagine that the vaccines will be required for some time going forward. But if some site says, you know what, we're going to get out of the vaccine monitoring business or the vaccines distribution business, we're going to do something else, they can still take that sensor and redeploy it. So it's not like it's a lost investment.
Right. And something that I just heard last night is that they're starting to distribute the vaccine. I want to say what did it say? A million a day or something like that, to places like Walgreens and CVS. Do you have any idea if CenTrak sensors are used in pharmacies in places like that?
Well, we do not typically, to this point, participate in the retail pharmacy business. Now, that's a very interesting model, because the Walgreens and the CVSs and the Rite Aids of the world do not typically have an ultra low -80 freezer. So that means that their warehouses, I'm not sure how many CVS or Walgreens have, but say collectively between the two of them, they have 60 to 75 around the country. So the vaccines will sit in those distribution centers where there are ultra low freezers. And then because it's a very well managed, or should be a very well managed, appointment-based system, that say the CVS in Tewksbury or wherever it might be says, okay, we've got 26 patients coming in today at these hours. So that distribution point is going to ship enough to cover those 26 patients. So even though there's an ultra low temperature storage requirement, in the distribution center, it can travel to specific retail sites and be held at less than ultra cold temperatures for a period of time before it becomes ineffective. So all those Walgreens and CVSs do have regular 2 to 8, -15 to 25 cold storage units.
I imagine for them, it's going to be a lot of, maybe a little sloppy at the beginning and a lot of trial and error. But thankfully, like you said, that it can be out of the freezer for X amount of hours. So that'll work to their advantage if there's, some buffers that they need in time.
Yeah, I think it all boils down to the effectiveness of the scheduling system.
Right. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what the coming weeks look like. That's for sure.
Yeah, well, we're all anxious to get it here in California. They were still in 1B, so seems like it's been a long time to get to the next level. We're hoping for something soon at CVS, Walgreens.
Well, I mean, your state's population is insane, so I imagine that's a big undertaking in a lot of ways.
Yeah, well, the population is, I believe, 39 or 40 million, but of that, I think there's still a question as to the the vaccination of adolescents. So a population, maybe it's 30 or 25, I don't know, but it's many millions. So they do need to get it right.
Yeah, I feel like it's different so much from state to state. Like, for example, New Hampshire seems to be ahead of the ball, but they also, have a much lower of a population. So I think it's easier in a lot of ways to get that rolled out in certain states. So
yeah, well, it's interesting. I mean, look at the state of Florida. They've rolled it out to many people that are in 1C, 65 years old. Well, that's a significantly larger part of the population in Florida than, and say, it might be in maybe New Hampshire or Iowa. Who knows? But I think they've got that down pretty well.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you again so much for talking with me. I know so much changed in the last couple of weeks that we spoke, and maybe sometime in the near future we can set something else up. But I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us.
Thanks for the interview, Amy, and I hope that this gets out there and it can be helpful to people, and hopefully put them at ease that our hospitals know how to manage this, and they should feel comfortable that when they do get the vaccine, it's going to do as promised.